In 2008, a disturbing incident occurred in Houston, Texas, involving a deadly high-speed car chase. It began when Ronald Carnaby, a Lebanese-American CIA agent, was pulled over by a police officer for speeding. Despite disclosing his CIA affiliation, the officer doubted Carnaby's claim and couldn't verify it. When asked to step out of the vehicle, Carnaby chose to flee, leading to a dangerous pursuit. After the chase, officers confronted Carnaby's vehicle, broke the window, and, as Carnaby exited, an officer shot him. He succumbed to his injuries. After the incident, there was disagreement within the police force regarding the public disclosure of information about the events. An internal affairs investigation was conducted, concluding that the shooting was justified based on the officer's perception of the situation. The police officers' union supported the officers and intended to challenge the disciplinary actions. However, the officer who fired the fatal shot, Charles Foster, was held accountable for violating police conduct, as stated in the Internal Affairs report. The union acknowledged these violations, but pledged to support the officers and appeal against the Internal Affairs findings. Foster and his defense argued that the department's training on high-risk stops had not adequately prepared him for the encounter. According to Foster's deposition, the training involved simulating passengers in a stopped vehicle, using chairs in a classroom at the police academy. Although the case was continued later, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in the United States in New Orleans heard the case after Susan Carnaby, Ronald Carnaby's wife, filed a lawsuit in 2010. The lawsuit concentrated on both the officers' behaviors and the department's training practices. Susan asserted that her husband's constitutional right to be free from unjustified seizures was violated by the officers' use of deadly force. The case was initially dismissed by a federal judge in 2009, who decided that the officers acted legally because they had a good faith belief that their lives were in danger. The officers, according to Susan Carnaby, should have approached Ronald's car in a different way because they lacked the necessary training for high-risk situations. Susan Carnaby, however, persisted. Her attorney argued that the use of lethal force would not have been required if the right procedures had been followed. Susan filed a lawsuit in order to obtain an injunction requiring the Houston Police Department to alter how it handles similar situations. Attorney for the city Dave Feldman argued that there was no proof of officer wrongdoing. He expressed confidence in the department's actions, asserting that the officers carried out their duties in a reasonable manner and did not infringe on Ronald Carnaby's constitutional right. In the end, the dispute was resolved amicably for an undisclosed sum of money. Moving on to another shocking story involving a CIA agent from Florida. In 2021, a peculiar shooting incident occurred on Interstate 95 in Martin County, Florida, involving a man who claimed to be a CIA agent. The event unfolded when a man with a gunshot wound to his stomach arrived at a way station. An off-duty police officer from Riviera encountered a crashed car and a bloodied man emerging from the nearby bushes. The officer swiftly ordered the man to the ground at gunpoint. Emergency responders arrived at the North Broadway station on I-95, 3 miles south of Bridge Road, where the injured man had pulled over. Around 14 miles to the north, a Riviera Beach police officer traveling in that direction discovered a crashed car. Shortly after, a man emerged from the bushes, later identified as Aaron Fedokovic from Ocala. Investigators believe that Fedokovic had fired shots at passing vehicles while driving north on I-95, claiming that he believed they were linked to the mafia. Fedokovic had suffered a gunshot wound to his right forearm, which investigators believed was self-inflicted. He claimed to be an undercover CIA agent investigating the mafia in Miami and stated that he had thrown his gun into the bushes. According to his accounts, he fired shots at a semi-truck in self-defense while driving back to Jacksonville on I-95. Investigators confirmed that Fedokovic had indeed fired shots at multiple vehicles, with one bullet causing a non-life-threatening injury to a 59-year-old man. They found a 9mm pistol magazine in Fedokovic's pocket, and he asserted that he needed to retrieve his gun to protect deputies, believing that the mafia was pursuing him and that he had a tracking device implanted on his stomach. Investigators suspected that Fedokovic may have been suffering from mental illness or drug-induced mental illness, which could have affected his judgment. Measures were taken to prevent him from accessing firearms, and he was scheduled for a mental health evaluation under the state's Baker Act. While facing charges, investigators determined that aggravated battery, not attempted murder, was the appropriate charge based on interviews and their assessment of his intent. The state would decide whether to transfer the case to the mental health court or proceed with criminal charges after gathering all the facts. Fedokovic was held in the St. Lucie County Jail with a $75,000 bond, facing an aggravated battery charge.